I'm sorry you guys are missing this fun conversation with the Girl Scouts.
I can hear Steve in the background. Just so that you know, we have a group of Girl Scouts in the office with Steve watching us tonight. So, David, behave yourself.
All right, you guys are live. Feel free to start when you're ready.
They can't see me on camera, so I'm good.
Okay, I'm calling this meeting to the February 1st, 2021 meeting of the Historic Site Committee to order at 6:34. So the first thing we have tonight is Michelle is sick, so she's being excused, and I'm going to be chairing this evening. So the first thing I'd like to do is call roll. Michelle is excused, so Anita Hawkins.
Here.
Joe Galley,
Here.
Dave Oliver,
Here.
Ray Dale.
Here.
I'm Gary Goodrich. Tina Thompson.
Here.
Okay, thank you. And Michelle is absent. So,
And don't forget Lisa.
I'm sorry,
Bo-
Lisa. I'm sorry, Lisa.
I'm talking later, so I'm here.
Yes, you're here. You're here. Lisa is our town board liaison to this committee, which is why I occasionally don't call on her. Sorry. So the first thing on the agenda is approval of the minutes from our last meeting, which there are copies here, but you've also all been emailed copies of that. So are there any questions, comments, or changes to the last meeting minutes from January 20th? Everybody take a minute and look. Okay, hearing none, can I get a motion to approve the minutes from January 20th?
I'll make a motion.
Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so Joe was first, Dave was second. Can I get a vote? Dave,
Aye.
Joe,
Aye.
Anita? Gary? Aye. Ray?
Aye.
Okay. Motion approved. Okay. We've had a little bit of correspondence since our last meeting. Mainly, we now have 6 applicants for the vacant position for our board. I spoke earlier today with the Supervisor Administrative Assistant, Maribeth Palmer, and we will begin scheduling interviews soon. The deadlines for these applications are February 11th at 3 p.m., and we actually got one this afternoon in about 4 p.m. So another one has come in. We had 5, now we have 6. So the first thing on the agenda for old business is the status of the Good Shepherd Church and the Burger House, which I'm going to turn over to Lisa.
Yes, so we passed a resolution at last Wednesday's meeting in reference to the historical properties. And I mean, I can read the resolution if you'd like. It's to authorize the purchase of 2 historical properties known as the Good Shepherd Church at 3286 East Henrietta Road and the Burger Farmhouse at 3306 East Henrietta Road. And basically it goes on to say that the Rush Henrietta Central School District purchased parcels that contain the Good Shepherd Church, school, rectory, and other ancillary structures and properties, including 2 historical structures, the church and the adjacent farmhouse, once belonging to the Burger family. The town of Henrietta and the school district both agree that preserving historical properties is important for a community. The building code regulations applied to public schools make it difficult or impossible for the school district to be able to use for educational purposes the historical buildings, especially the farmhouse. Do you want me to read the whole thing?
No.
Okay.
It's not necessary.
So basically what it goes on to say is that it is going to transfer to us and that we do have the right to maintain the properties. We are actually purchasing the 2 parcels for $1. But we have the right to maintain the properties until the transaction is complete. So
Thank you.
I know one of the worries that the Historical Site Committee had is that it would not be maintained.
Right. And we really appreciate the town board's help on that and Steve Schultz. And we have some guests tonight that I will recognize. We have a group of Girl Scouts here tonight. Not sure if you guys can see.
So as you heard, one of the things that they were just talking about, based on the recommendation of the Historic Site Committee, the town board passed a resolution to buy a historic church and a historic farmhouse because the school district owned them, but because of their building codes for schools, they couldn't maintain them. And so we worked out a deal with the school district where the town will buy them, the town will maintain them, and it's gonna be another meeting of the Shepherd Church. And the Good Shepherd School, the school district will keep all the property behind it, but we're gonna keep the historic buildings, yeah. Did you? Oh, for the pre-K? Yeah, they have a good program there. So this is the Historic Site Committee, and there's a couple of people online, and they're going over some business, so we will, thank you for letting us interrupt.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, guys. Now, the only thing that was brought my attention, well, I had seen it, but it was actually a question that was brought to my attention, and I would have asked Steve, but he's a little
Right.
busy at the moment, is the subdivide.
Right.
When we had originally talked about this, we as a committee had said we liked the outer boundary, but we were trying to keep the inner boundary, to keep the two of them as two separate historic properties.
Okay.
And now I'm seeing them as one. And Michelle had commented about this also. I don't know, can you put that up, Becky, from the resolution, the boundary definition picture? This one?
Sorry, I'm trying to see what you're showing.
I'm sorry, where can I do it so you can see it?
Yes. I know what you're talking about. Give me just a minute to pull it up.
Okay,
So-
thank you.
Gary, if you go further in the resolution, it says that the town will re-subdivide the existing parcels so as to create two new parcels.
Right, but the
Oh,
two,
wait, one containing the church and farmhouse and one containing
Right.
the remainder of those cropped parcels.
right, one's going to be
Right.
the school district and one's going to be the
Correct.
town, which was a
Right.
question that it was brought up, and
Okay, so you're saying that the hopes of the Historical Site Committee was that the church would be one parcel and the Burger Farmhouse would be another parcel?
correct, that's what we had discussed. I'd have to go back and look at the date. And when Steve and I had discussed this, we were talking about the dividing line being the driveway for the farmhouse, which is between the two buildings.
What's the benefit of having two parcels instead of just the one?
Honestly, I'm not sure. I just know when we originally discussed that, that's what we had put forth, and I was wondering why that had changed. I mean, maybe it's for tax benefit or something, they want to combine them. My other concern with subdividing or combining these two is in the past, specifically with the Dollar General issue in the West Village, they wanted to subdivide a historic property, cut it down so that the Dollar General, oh good, there it is on the screen. So the Dollar General could have the blank spot to the south of the historic Greek Revival. And we as a committee and the board had said, no, you can't do this. You can't subdivide a current historic property. Now, in this case, we're not subdividing a current historic property, we are combining them. And I just don't want to open a door in the future for something else like this happening.
Right, so if you're combining it, you would put it into one parcel instead of two. I'm still not understanding why we would want two parcels instead of just the one for basically the same. Right
I,
there, I mean, if that's the house,
Right.
It's two separate buildings that are
Right.
historic sites.
And yes, see where the driveway is, Dave? That was basically where the property line originally came up through. And that's what we as a committee and Steve had discussed back a year ago when this was all starting out.
Is
There's
the
possible
question,
advantages to have them combined together that I'm not aware of.
Yeah, because if the whole thing is combined into one parcel, there's no way you're gonna put anything in between them. And then
Right.
they still have the driveway leading to the school on the north. I don't, I'm just, because I know I missed it, I'm just trying to
Yeah,
understand.
no. And the question was put to me is, okay, why did they do this?
Yeah,
And-
I don't know the answer to that question. And I can ask Steve on it. I wasn't part of what made them decide to go to one parcel over
Okay.
two parcels. So I don't know the answer, but I will certainly ask the question and I will get back to you with an
Right.
answer.
Yeah, I was going to ask him tonight, but
Yeah, it's kind of hard with the
Yes, it
the little
is.
ones here.
Gary,
yes, ma'am.
I think the concern of the Historic Site Committee was that if two historic properties could be combined by the town, then, or if they could, if original historic sites could be manipulated in
Right.
terms, then why couldn't it happen in the future for another project in a different part of the community? And it might be that it's because the town is doing this, that takes it out of the realm of the Historic Site Committee in terms of, what might happen in the future.
Right.
Am I clear on this? Am I making sense?
Oh, yeah, very much so. And that was one of my concerns is in the future, okay, you manipulated this one and this one. Well, why can't we manipulate this property?
Right.
So, and we've been taking the stand for the past few years that it's not just the building, it's the property that is historic
Right.
with the surrounding land. And so I was just going to ask, if we could find out, okay, why did they decide, why did the Steve and the board decide to do it this way? And Lisa will find that out for us so that we can get that answer.
Sure. Okay.
So did that make sense to everyone?
Yeah, I mean, it looks like either way, though, it's preserved either way.
Yes.
with One
Right.
parcel or
Yeah.
two. And I think also when you're talking the combination of historic properties, you're also talking about intent. So the intent here is to protect, whereas Tina's talking about the intent to combine in order to manipulate for some sort of business type of thing. So I mean,
Right.
it's,
Right. And one of the main
I have to dumb it
concerns,
down from my brain so I can.
no, and one of the main concerns is, as we move forward
Yeah.
with the West Hamlet, and notice I've started to use the word hamlet instead of village, thank you, New York State, is the Cartwright property. And the two properties next door to each other there. And the 5711, the Greek Revival, has a big blank lot between it and the old Holleran's funeral home. So manipulating properties is a fear.
But also that could work in our favor too.
It could.
So if someone buys both those and then combines the Cartwright with the house to the south, then, they want to keep the whole thing together, to keep the preservation part of it. I mean, it can work in our
Right.
favor too. So I mean,
Oh, for sure. And Steve might have a very valid reason.
yeah.
So we'll find
I
out.
remember hearing something about parking and land banking parking. So I'm not sure, but I will find out. So I
Okay.
remember us talking about parking and land banking parking. So let me find out if that was the reason.
Yeah, at the last town board meeting, you were talking, or Steve was talking about the land banking parking
Right.
because of the issue that the school didn't want to
Right.
guarantee.
We wanted to make sure that we still continue to have parking there, yes.
Okay. So that being said, any other comments on this thing? This is a good save. I mean, they were going to demolish these two buildings and now we preserved them and actually the town can have use of them. And moving forward, Steve has asked us in the past if we had some ideas on how to use the two buildings, which we had put forth. But the church, I think they're looking at some sort of community center allowing for things. So,
Right.
Right, and we were actually talking at the last town board meeting, the potential of working on the lower level, making sure we had bathrooms on upper and lower level and potentially putting a kitchen in as well, so that it would almost be that we could almost rent out both levels,
Oh, nice.
which would be nice to be able to utilize it a little
Yes.
bit more.
Yeah, I think Steve's first project was getting it handicap accessible,
Correct.
if I'm correct.
Right.
Yeah,
And a handicap accessible bathroom as well.
right. Okay, so that was really good news for all of us. The next thing on the agenda is property research projects, and I know that Dave just got volunteered for this at our last meeting and probably hasn't had much time to do much of anything, but we'll just ask for an update.
I haven't done anything.
Okay, did you receive the information that I
I
shared with you?
did get all that stuff.
Okay, so you got it.
Yeah, and I have most of the structures already completed anyway, so,
Yeah, I knew you did, but
yeah, just linking them to the house. Linking, what I'll do now is link them to particular family names so that we kind of have a genealogy behind some of the historic structures. So we, kind of put a face or a family to the structure. But
yeah, and I've got another file that Tina gave me a while back that I've been working with. And I can't remember if it was Eleanor or somebody else, Tina can correct me, but she had been going through the maps of the East Village and has it laid out with the different names that were on the different era maps and who owned them and the time periods they did, which could be helpful to you.
Yeah.
That came from either Bertha or Ethel Calkins.
That's right, it was Ethel Calkins, yes.
Mhm.
Okay, so that might be handy for you. And Ray, you had in the past volunteered to help Doe with some of the East Village research stuff. Is that something you're still?
Yeah, I'm still willing to do it.
Okay, so Dave can contact you with things he may need.
Okay.
Okay. So the next thing up was Anita, which Anita has the West Village, but what she's going to talk about tonight is she had brought up with us the Ontario County Historian's Office at the last meeting, and she had a meeting with them, which I wish I could have gone to, but I was working. So would you like to give us an update on that? And she gave me some copies and some stuff you guys can look at after.
I had gotten in touch with the Ontario County Historical Society, and they are located on 55 Main Street in Canandaigua. And I was able to go to a meeting with Betty McMahon, who is the research coordinator, and two of her assistants, Marie and Yvonne, were there. This was this past Friday, January 29th. And I was there for probably about 2 hours. And I got to talk to them and pick their brains a bit about their research projects that they have just recently started. I believe that they have completed 3 of these home histories that they have been working on. And it began with a request from a homeowner in, I believe it might have been on Gibson Street or Hubble in Canandaigua. And they just wanted to know more information about their property and what did the Historic Society have that could possibly give them a broader understanding of the chain of ownership, a narrative of the house itself, and then they had various deeds and histories as well as directories that they have put in these binders. I have taken a few photos of what the covers of the binders look like, as well as the contents are. And Betty was kind enough to present me with a guide, kind of like, a guide sheet for us to see the places and resources that we could use as we begin to look at the homes. And, this all came about because of doing the inventory that Joe and Kitty helped me with this summer. And property owners were asking us some of these same questions, I believe, that came from a request from one of the residents in Canandaigua. So we were wondering if the Henrietta Historical Society, as well as the Historic Site Committee, could partner so that we could, number one, get the information that we need for our West Henrietta Hamlet, and then eventually the East Henrietta Hamlet. And then, is there a possibility, because the Ontario County Historic Society, they are able to use this as a source of revenue for their society. And they have billable hours, and that the way in which they put that together. And then I gave Gary the original copy of their hard copy of their December newsletter. And in there is an article that they put just to kind of stir up even more interest. Besides these three properties that two are completed and the other one has just started. And the title of this little blurb is, "What if your house could talk?" And then it goes on to say that, have you ever wondered about the chain of ownership and all of the other things that you'd like to know about the people who have lived in your home? So I guess that's about it as far as the meeting. They are extremely knowledgeable, as well as being willing to help us in whatever we decide as, the path we're going to take. So anyhow, that's what I was able to, secure from them. And like I said, I do have some photos that I can share after the meeting with anyone who wants to take a look at it. So I guess my question is then, well, what's next? How else do we want to pursue this? And if so, what is that going to look like? So.
Well, at past meetings, we have already decided that this would be a good thing to pursue. The next step, I'm not exactly sure of. Tina, any suggestions there?
Well, I can talk to Anita maybe sometime this week and get an idea of what kind of time frame we're looking at and whether or not we're going to need to offer training to anyone who's interested in participating. And if we're doing genealogical studies and looking for deed records, I might be able to get some help from the Rochester Genealogical Society. I know, Gary, you know how to do this, but you have a full-time job. So I was thinking that maybe we could seek a trainer from the Rochester Genealogical Society, just so people understand the terminology in the old deeds and different things like that, because they talk about grantors and grantees. And today, it's the buyer and the seller. But they're just, especially for anyone who's not familiar with doing this kind of research, I think to offer a short Zoom presentation would make them feel a little bit more secure in going forward with this.
I think that's a wonderful idea, especially doing some sort of a Zoom where we can actually impact more people than we could if we were to do it here. And
Right.
people would be at home with their computers and, okay.
Yes. Yeah.
The two of you will get together and figure it out, and you can update us at the next meeting.
Okay, that sounds great, Tina. Yeah,
Okay. Thank you, Anita.
we'll schedule something.
Yes. Thank you.
All righty. So the next thing on the agenda is Lisa is up again to give us what's happening with the proposed distribution center in West Henrietta. Becky was going to have, did you get new plans for that?
No.
Becky was going to copy and present to us tonight, and she made the comment she forgot. So as soon as I get that PDF, I'll be sending it out to everybody that has theoretically the new plans for this area. Michelle got some in the mail, but Michelle isn't here, so.
So I reached out to Supervisor Schultz and just, asked him to kind of let us know where we are, where things are going with this. And so he gave me a few points that I wanted to share with the committee. The first thing he said is that they've turned down Rochester General's request to switch to an Erie Station Road address because they were afraid that people using the GPS to get them there would be then directed to drive through the historical corner, including trucks, which we wanted to avoid. So they told them that they needed to stay at 5500 West Henrietta Road, and they asked the developer to commit to putting them on the marquee sign that sits out front there now. The developer has also reached out to say that there is a client that is a manufacturer. Their building would be shorter and about 25% less square feet, and thus could be positioned further away from the historical properties. Steve also approached the developer and said he would work their plans to try to keep the building at least 250 feet from any historical property. He's saying the parking lot might go to the 150-foot limit, but the building would definitely be further away. He also approached the developer, and he is good with creating the necessary berms and green walls to better screen the new construction from the historical properties, including not taking down the existing trees by the cobblestone. He also approached the developer, and the developer is fine with putting a nice facade on the front of the building that is consistent with the architecture of the neighborhood. And then he also wanted to remind you that we did pass the local law that adds historical properties to the most restrictive category with respect to required site plan buffering from existing properties. So in this case, it would be a 150-foot buffer between existing buildings and any structure or pavement.
And we have Steve here, so he
And
can
Steve's
answer
back.
any other
Did you want
questions.
to add anything to that, Steve?
Not particularly. Becky had mentioned that you guys had some questions. One of the things, the reason we haven't shared the plans is they're not official yet. He sent them out to a prospective customer. So until that customer signs up, he doesn't want them
Okay.
shared. So he showed them to me, but I don't actually even have them to share with you.
So that means that the set that Michelle got in the mail must be the old set then that somebody sent her. She got a set in the mail this past week.
Yeah, do you know who it came from?
No, I do not.
Yeah, then it was probably the old plans because
Right.
the new ones weren't out. There is a site plan on there because the existing building was sold to, was it RGH?
Yes.
And one of the questions that came up, and it was in that list, is that they wanted to shift their street address to Erie Station Road, and we denied it. But one of the things we did on there was, so the entrance road between West Henrietta Road and the RGH property, that's going to be essentially either have an easement on it or be property in common so that it's shared by both the existing building and the new building. That way their street address will stay 5500 West Henrietta Road. And it may sound like a trivial thing, but if you think about it, someone punches in a GPS, if it tells them to go to Erie Station Road, where are all the trucks going to do? They're going to come down West Henrietta Road and they're going to turn left through the historic intersection, which we don't want. They've also, one of the things I did forget to mention on that, they changed the plan around. There was going to be an entrance from the new building right out to Erie Station Road. They got rid of that based on the feedback from the public hearing. You can actually still get out that way, but you have to go all the way around the
Delphi?
former Delphi building, so it's not convenient. And again, that's intentional because we're trying to discourage people going in and out of that entrance. We want everyone to come out of the 5500 entrance, since that's north of the historic properties. Although I guess the Moose Lodge is still there, but
Yeah,
it's hard to avoid all the historic properties if you're on West Henrietta Road, so,
yeah, especially in the West Village.
right. But the point is, if we can keep them out of those four corners, we want to. So, the proposal that they put in, and they've got a couple different ones out, but in all these other tenants, they're smaller uses in terms of floor plan as well as height. A couple of them are allowed uses. So this one that they were going to do is what's referred to as a permitted use, which basically means you can do it as long as you get a special use permit. The other use is an allowed use, which means you don't even need a special use permit. Excuse me. But because we started the process, I told them no matter, even if you end up with an allowed use, we'll finish the process. They'll be granted because we couldn't deny them anyway. But the point is, I don't want the public to think, oh, they approved it behind the scenes.
Okay.
So no matter what, it'll be back at town board. And even so, even if it's an allowed use, the seeker process still takes place. So, their current plan is to dig it into the hill. So the one, hopefully, I'm hoping that the tenant they reached out to takes it, because they only need about a 35 foot height. And there is over 50 feet of elevation difference from the entrance road off of West Henrietta Road and the hill at Erie Station Road, which basically means if they do cut it back into the hill, you won't even see it you'll be looking down on it, but I know a lot of the people who live on Erie Station Road, they're concerned about the effect it will have on their view of downtown. So they would essentially be looking down on this building. They did agree to move the berm to the east so that they will not be taking out the trees that surround the cobblestone. And so they would put the berm behind that. And so again, hopefully when you look out from the historic cobblestone, although we need to pressure him, he doesn't get the 150 feet unless
If he doesn't create it, right?
he's got to register that house.
Yeah.
So but if he does, they'll do it such that you won't be able to see the building from the, now if it's the taller building, it might get close. You might be able to see the top of it, but that's why I'm hoping that he successfully gets signs a deal with this other manufacturer.
Now, a question that came up, and until I heard the new plans, I wasn't even going to bring it forward, but Michael Hedding's house is currently in the process of becoming nationally registered. Once it becomes nationally registered, there's a federal, and I don't know the exact number, it's 106 point something, that if you're putting a commercial next to a currently registered historic site, there's this whole other things that you have to go through. So if he gets registered before the actual approval, would they have to go through that
I
process?
don't know, we'd have to talk to the town attorney.
Okay,
Because they filed and applied for the special use permit, I don't know,
right,
I don't know order of precedence.
okay,
It might be added to the seeker process, but I don't know.
okay. Yeah, I wish I had that here, but I wasn't thinking about it being impacted, so. Anybody else have any questions about that for Steve at the moment? And then I've got one more for him. Okay, just to back up for a moment, because we already talked about Good Shepherd, and Lisa did a really good job explaining, but a question that had come up when we originally talked about this. Now you're combining these two into one historic property. When we had originally talked about it a year ago, we had talked about keeping them separate with the driveway being a dividing line. And it was brought up, okay, what are the advantages, disadvantages to this? You must have had something idea in mind when you combined them?
Now, if we drew the line, so I didn't see much advantage to putting the line down the middle. If you can explain one to me, tell me. The disadvantage is we'd have to get variances for everything. Because we're moving the property lines, we're creating new parcels, therefore they have to follow all the new rules.
Okay,
Because of the existing setback from the road, they do cover that, but they don't cover the allowance for the side setback. Not to mention, we were talking about building one parking lot for both parcels, for both buildings. And so if that parking lot straddles a parcel, it becomes problematic. Because will essentially be parked buildings and not houses, the ones won't be a house, there isn't a problem with having two structures on one parcel. We checked into that. So unless there's an advantage to having them as two separate parcels, it made more sense to do it as one.
see, I knew you would have a reason, but we didn't know when it had been brought forth to me, and I was like, I can't answer that question. I'll
Right.
ask Steve.
Yeah, so that's why we did it that way. It also will save the town money because that's one less line we have to survey. So, we're going to have to survey the outline of that property and that's it. So the plan is, we will hire the surveyor, he'll stake it out. Members from the town and the school district will go both make sure the stakes are where we all think they are in our head. When I did the drawing, I specifically used visually identifiable points to be able to give the surveyor clear directions that we could all agree on.
Yeah, the tree in the corner.
The tree and there's
Right.
like a drain thing in the ground and it's where the road splits. And we had actually shifted the southern boundary ever so slightly because it used to go right through the middle of a tree. And I didn't want to have to deal with this, whose tree is it? So I talked to the school district and they, I said, you got your choice. You either get a little bit more land, but then you have to deal with the tree, or you give us a little bit more land and we have to deal with the tree. So we actually rotated a little. It adds like 1.5 square feet. It was a good compromise. The other thing we did at the same thing on the other side, we didn't want their driveway to be a shared access. If you look at the original parcel line. So we rotated that and just ran the parcel line parallel to the highway entrance. So again, we gave them essentially a portion that was our parcel out in their high road, and they gave us a parcel that was in the grass. So it was a good trade. Keeps more green space around the church itself. In terms of the plans, our facilities team went out there and looked. The buildings are in pretty good shape. The roof on the farmhouse will probably have to be replaced in the not too distant future. It will be a tear off. I will probably recommend we go to a steel roof if that's okay from a historic standpoint. Because from a maintenance, it's a heck of a lot better. But if that's not consistent, then we can go with something that's more consistent.
Depends on what kind of metal roof you
Yeah, I
get.
was going to say it depends on the style of metal roofing. Metal roofing was what I originally thought when we talked about it a year ago.
Yeah, the wider the slates, the better.
Okay.
And with present town code, you can put a metal roof over top of.
There's too many, you can, code-wise. Well, it's close. It's to the point, the next roof can't be a roof over, it has to be a tear-off.
Okay.
But I've never liked putting metal roof over shingles. It's just, you're much better off taking it down to the tar paper, putting it flat on that. You get much better results.
Yeah, one of the
And-
benefits of the metal too is you're taking all of that weight off the rafters
Right.
from the
Right.
asphalt, so. I mean,
And when you tear it off, you can check the wood.
Yes.
So,
Um,
no,
Yeah.
one of the things that had been brought forth just before you came in, whoops, sorry, was in the past, we really try not to manipulate historic property lines. And a little of the concern was, okay, in this case, we're putting them together, and in the past, they wanted us to subdivide, break them up, and we said no. You did, as a town board.
For which one?
That would have been Dollar General, when they wanted to break that parcel up next to the house.
Well, it wasn't so much, it wasn't even necessarily just that breaking it up. was the issue. It was that they were taking a huge chunk of green space away from the
Right.
parcel.
Right.
To be honest, I don't care where they draw the property lines. As long as, the only reason we don't want them to subdivide is to subdivide out the grass and then say, well, it's not historic.
Right.
What we did is we actually included more of the grass. We gave up some of the driveway in exchange for getting more of the grass. And again, we did the same thing on the south side. We rotated the property line so it's a little bit more perpendicular, so it doesn't extend out into the driveway that the school uses to park the driver's ed car, but includes that back tree in that
Right.
corner. So, as a general rule, we were trying to protect as much of the green space around it. And the plans we have for a center parking lot, excuse me, we're only going to do, the term is land bank. So we're going to land bank that parking, which just means we're going to reserve the space for it. We'll never put anything there, but we will only build it if we need it. As long as we're able to share the parking with the school, we're not going to build that parking. It just doesn't make sense for us to do that. If it gets to the point where their use is such that that parking lot's always full and we can't use it, and then we'll explore building it. But they don't envision that. The only times that we would likely see a conflict will be football games, because down the road, that's going to be, they're talking about connecting a road from Lehigh Station, the parking lots back there, throughout, so that during a football game, people can exit out onto 15A instead of it going back out to Lehigh Station.
Right. Coming out the exit that's shown here alongside the boundary line.
You got it.
Right.
So during football games, I expect that parking lot to be full. If there are events at the same time as football games, we'll have to figure out, do they shuttle from the town parking lots, or do they fight with the football traffic? But in terms of the church itself, there's a question mark as to the old furnace system was removed and there's a new furnace system in there. Our facilities guys couldn't tell whether it was sufficient to bring that to decent temperature. It's certainly enough to keep it from freezing. So we're going to bring in our heating contractor or someone to take a look at it. The good news is, if it needs more heat, we have that. When I first took office, if you'll recall, I got rid of the heater onlys on the top of the rec center, put in heating air conditioning units. So we still have those heaters. We kept them in the event that we ever needed them for a facility. So we could potentially put it in there, or depending on the cost, we may elect to put in a heater air conditioner, so we could, we wouldn't be able to chill the room, but we could certainly, if nothing else, you dehumidify it in the summer. So the big thing we'll have to do interior wise is add more bathrooms, and specifically a handicap accessible bathroom. One of the things we expect to do on the first floor is where the confessional is. And there's currently a small claustrophobic bathroom there. We plan to blow that out and put two, at least one will be fully handicap accessible and the other one will be, it will be HCA if we can get it that big. And then potentially some others on the east side of essentially the backstage of the altar. In terms of wheelchair access, right now, the only handicap accessibility is a stair glide type chair, which isn't good. We don't want to modify the front of the building. And so the plan is there's an exit out of the northeast corner that leads straight into the floor of the main church hall as well as into the back rooms. And so our plan would be to actually remove that door, build a ramp right out, and essentially a covered handicap access from there. The reason we would remove the door and potentially move, I don't know that we can use that specific door. It just has to do with the width of the door. It's really close when it comes to handicap accessibility. So the plan would then be to work, to use materials that are consistent with the rest of the church, whether that be brick, whether that be clapboard, whatever.
Right, because the back of the church is clapboard.
Back of the church is clapboard. So, it might be one of those where it's not exactly the foundation, but, the wall up to the floor would be brick and then it would be clapboard above there or whatever, that will probably, I'm hoping we'll be able to find professionals who will volunteer their service, but if not, we'll hire an architect to do some work on that. But the idea is that would then head out to the east to the parking lot right back there, and that would be where our handicap spots are.
Awesome.
Any
Any
other
other
questions on that?
questions or comments so we can let Steve go home and have dinner?
The only real religious iconography in there are the little crosses on the light fixtures. So we haven't decided what we're going to do. I said we'll leave them at first and we'll figure out what to do with them. That might be some good future fundraisers, but so amazingly, at least compared to all the churches I grew up in, there wasn't the religious iconography in the stained glass.
Right.
So the church I grew up in, that's where the Stations of the Cross were. They were actually in the stained glass. So, the other thing we're hoping, you can see from the basement that it's hardwood flooring. And so we're going to take off the carpeting and see what it's like underneath. Now, we may have to put carpeting back down for reasons of echo. But we're going to see, if we can get away without it. Right now, the room is filled with all the desks that the school district has had to pull out of their classrooms in order to meet pandemic requirements. Basically when we've completed right now the sales contract and the lease agreement are at the two lawyers' desks. As soon as they both have one that'll approve, I'll sign off it and Bo will sign off on it. And we'll actually execute we'll execute the sales contract. It's still a bunch of time because we have to do the surveying and we have to file and all the paperwork and all that. In the meantime, we'll have a lease agreement so we can actually start working on it, start doing improvements to it. We're not allowed to spend town funds on private property. Now I realize it's school district property, but as far as we're concerned, it's not town property.
Yet.
Until we either have to own it or we have to have a sales agreement and a sales contract and lease agreement in place. So that's the idea of that, because one of the things we want to do is get the farmhouse does not have a currently working furnace. No, they shut off all the water in there, but you don't like a building to stay that cold that long. So we're hoping that we'll soon be able to get in there and get a furnace in there. Again, the plans there is that's going to be a office space for a bunch of town organizations. So Raft, the Rotary, I don't remember who the other ones are. One of the things in that regards is what we will be doing is with those who are interested, we'll be signing a contract. And it's actually kind of funny is because you always hear that quid pro quo is a bad thing. It's actually required in this case. We cannot give them free office space unless they provide services for the town. Oh, the garden club, that's another one.
Yeah, I was going to say tinker with the garden club.
Yep. So like I said, there's, we'll basically, we could either charge them rent or like I said, every time they do the services, we would just extend the contract. So for instance, Rotary, every year, they get money for projects in the town. So like the most recent one is they're building a pavilion over at Baldwin Cabin. Baldwin Cabin used to have a pipe and, canopy pavilion and a windstorm destroyed it. So they're building a permanent one. They've done, if you look all over town, there's a bunch of picnic tables with the Rotary symbol. They did the trail at Tinker Park, the exercise trail. So they do this stuff for us all the time. So anytime they do one of those, we're just going to sign a multi-year agreement. And every time they do another one, we'll just keep extending it out. And that way, you know, it's sort of our thank you for these organizations that do stuff. Henrietta Foundation, that's the other one, that do stuff for the town, and give them a place where they can meet. And so the idea is each of the bedrooms will be an individual office for those organizations, and the living room will be the main meeting, living room and kitchen will be the main meeting area. So that's what we're looking at. But this way, you know, we can preserve the house, and it will be public space. And, you know, one of the things that will be interesting is to see, again, if there are craft people who would be willing to do some restoration work on the inside as well to, you know, like I know my cousin used to have a house up in Irondequoit near the zoo, and it had some of the most gorgeous gumwood that somebody had painted over. And so my cousin's husband spent years sanding that down and refinishing, and it was just gorgeous. I don't know, I haven't looked deep enough to see what we can do there, but you know, even as we found with a lot of the stuff is if people are pulling stuff out of their historic houses, you know, can we get some of that stuff? There's I forgot what it's called downtown that they specifically do that. In fact,
House parts.
yeah.
Yeah, house
South
parts,
Ave,
yeah.
When we built our house, we went and got stained glass windows from there. So, you know, we'll look at doing stuff like that to essentially, you know, working with the folks who know the historical, you know, what would be typical of an inside like that in case, you know, so if it's been remodeled and some of the history is gone, can we essentially put some of it back? Whether it's an exact match for what was ever in there, it could at least be, you know, example of the period
Yeah,
that that house was
historical
built.
context, right?
Right. So
Now,
kind of what
would,
we're looking at.
would the area scouts be eligible for that if they needed a place to meet?
So the church would actually probably make a better location than the house.
Okay.
But yes, that's you know, so the other thing we're talking about too is we've been losing a number of polling places. So that makes actually a really good polling place once it's handicap accessible. You know, it's basically going to be like a cabin, just a lot bigger. And then one of the other things we're going to do is we're going to figure out where we could potentially put a lift. And again, it's going to be one of those that we're not going to do right away, but we'll at least reserve the location for it, because I would also like to activate the basement. The basement is a great space, but it's also not handicap accessible.
Right.
So, you know, I'd like to be able to put a lift in there at some point to be able to make it accessible as well. But yeah, those will be two, you know, absolutely Boy Scouts using that church would be, you know, a good use. Although I will say it will probably be a little echoey. So, you know, if the kids get yelling, I do know, like when the Girl Scouts, the last time I did the Girl Scouts, they were in here and they got on these microphones. Oh my God, was it loud?
We
And as I was
we
saying-
could hear them in the background
Right,
before Becky, we went live.
right.
So Steve, what's the anticipated timeline of getting all of the legal process taken care of and then starting to put into place some of these ideas that you have?
So I would say it's probably a week or two of the town attorney and the school attorney to finalize the lease agreement and the sales contract. And whereas that might sound hopeful for, you know, two lawyers from two different organizations, those agreements started with the school district. So it's basically our town attorney has to make any recommended changes and they'll agree on those. And there weren't a whole lot. So the actual sale and transfer, I expect to be, like I said, 2 weeks maybe. As far as the process to do the re-subdivide, well, I was doing that on property across the street. We started in November. It's still going on. So I would guess probably 3-4 months. You know, that, again, it has to be surveyed. They have to draw up the meets and bounds, they have to do a title search, they have to do, it has to get filed at the county clerk's office. There's a lot of stuff that has to happen. So if we had a closing date before June, I'd be ecstatic. But again, in the meantime, we'll be able to have the rental agreement. And my thought is that the first thing I would get them working on is the new bathrooms. And the reason is I'd prefer not to kick out to make the school district have to go and find rental storage for all those chairs. So I figure if we can be working on the other stuff during the rest of the school year, and then at the end of the school year, they take them out. The only reason I would want to get those out of there is I want to use it as a polling place for the primaries this summer. Because again, we've lost the dome because it's the point of distribution point of dispensing for the COVID vaccine. We lost Al Siegel Center, CP Rochester, because they did the new construction, the new housing and stuff like that. So there's a lot of sites that we've lost, and we're trying to find new locations. And with COVID, it's not easy. So having that, being able to use that as so again, the two things I'd be working on this spring are the bathrooms and the ramp. And that way by summer, we'd be able to use the building as a polling location. Anything else?
Well, since you're here,
Sure.
anything more you'd like to add about the Chapman Corners? I know the people aren't back in town yet, and we're going
Right.
to move forward, but
Yeah, so we updated the plans, with the parking lots. I don't know if I have sent you that drawing as to how many parking spaces we think we can get in there. They like the idea. They intend to work to get a lot of the stuff in there, the benches, the chess table, even the fountain. I warned them that fountains aren't cheap, but their idea is to make all the improvements and then sell the park to us for the amount they purchased, and essentially the town gets the benefit of all the improvements that they made. So there were some Eagle Scouts looking for projects, so I sent them their way, although again, they're not back for another week. And so, hopefully they'll be creating some of that, some of those benches. They have some connections in the School of American Crafts over at RIT. They're going to look to see if they can create some things. Again, once we have we'll have to set up a purchase agreement and effectively a rental agreement with them so that we can start working on the Three Sisters building. So again, because of when it was built, I'm sure there's asbestos. So we'll have to mitigate that. The plan is to rip off the front of the building, but leave the other three walls, and then, clean it all up and basically have it showcases or, whatever. But basically that's where all the historical, you can have pictures, you could have whatever, showcase, whatever Tina and you guys decide we want to have in there to commemorate the Western Hamlet.
right.
But that's the idea, is it'll be, again, it's not going to be a building, it's going to be a shelter. But we wanted to keep the building because for a lot of people, the Three Sisters ice cream has a lot of memories. So,
Mhm. Especially the people in that area.
right. So like I said, did you see at least one of the drawings?
No, not yet. no.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll forward out to you tomorrow. I'll send you out the latest drawing. It has the parking lot on there and the trail.
I just got the last ones that had their brochure and their ideas in it.
Right. Yeah, so they have somebody who did, they're like a parkitect type. So they put something together, and again, the idea was we wanted it to be different than our other parks, which is we came up together with the idea of the fountain. That's something that we don't have in any park here.
Right.
We expect it to be a good location for people, you know, post-wedding to go get some pictures taken,
Yeah.
especially with some of the historic buildings there, especially if I'm able to finally find somebody who's willing to sink a bunch of money into restoring Cartwrights.
That was going to be my next question. Is there any updates on Cartwrights?
No updates on that, unfortunately. It's tough right now because everybody's in a holding pattern because of where business is with the pandemic.
Right.
I'll stay on top of it, you know. One of the things I may take a look at and see is if I can personally donate a patch to the roof.
Oh,
There's a bit of a hole in the eave of the roof on the western side. And so I'd like to get a temporary patch over it. So I'll reach out to the realtor and see if I can get permission from the family to do something so it doesn't further deteriorate.
Yeah, for sure. Because that's on the main roof,
It's,
the main body roof?
yes, it is on the
Yeah.
main, it's on one of the two gables.
Right,
Yeah, if it was on the additions, I wouldn't care.
right.
At least not the additions to the west. You know, when we took a look at it, I told whoever was going to be working on it, both the old potential partner and the new potential partner, just remove the old kitchens. They're not part of the historic building. Tear them off, fill in the ground underneath, compress it, and do slab on stone. That's where, that was actually, you know, it's interesting, the new building, because of how they were built in those days, you know, they're 12-inch square beams, posts and beam construction. It's solid as all get out. The floor in the new section, there was one section, if you stepped on it, you were going to be in the basement. And basically vermin came up through there, and that's what they lost their certificate of health,
Right.
your Department of Health certificate for operation for the restaurant. So that just needs to go away. I suspect the upstairs, because of the deteriorating roof, the upstairs will probably have to be gutted. But it was an inn, and it was when we were up there, it wasn't in the best shape.
No, and all of those apartments wouldn't be
Yeah.
really necessary for anything moving forward,
And
so.
one of the things that was talked about is stripping it right down to the post and beam and leaving it 2 stories open. So we'll take a look at that. There is some parts where the foundation walls are crumbling, but again, they're not super structural. The main weight of that building is borne by those posts. So, you know, again, it's stuff that does need to be taken care of, but now again, I'm not a structural engineer, but I did have a friend with me who builds structures for a living, and he looked at it and he was like, man, this is solid. The only one place where there's some concern, they had a chef's table that was wider than the space between the posts and beams, so they cut a big notch out of the post.
oh, yeah, yeah, I remember.
I think I have pictures of that, actually.
Now, it is repairable, but it was just like, what are you doing? Cut the table. I don't get it. But like I said, the bones of that structure are still really sound, even if, you know, some of the skin is aging, for lack of a better way to put it. It will definitely need to be decontaminated. The coffee grounds are still there.
There's
I've
a lot
always
of
said-
stuff still
It
there.
is. I always said if somebody wants to film an apocalypse, like especially a zombie apocalypse movie, that is the location. It absolutely looks like that zombies came through and everybody bolted.
Yeah, especially upstairs. I mean, when I
Right.
was there, there's clothes in the closet that are still in bags with the sales tags on them.
Clothes and records and,
Lots of records, yeah.
yeah.
Wow.
None of the vinyl was any.
But you
music
probably
that I
haven't
was a
seen
fan
that.
of.
I should send you the link to the
Well, I had
video.
heard of the kitchen was basically they served their last meal and walked out the door and didn't do a dish.
Yep,
Right.
So I had heard that, and I'd heard there was leftovers still sitting in, you know, whatever you
Yeah.
envision, but I hadn't realized that there was
Right.
clothes in closets and things like that.
And then some of what's happened is, you know, where there was the suspended ceiling and stuff like that, some of that has come down.
Yep.
And then you've got the insulation hanging down. So but again, that's cosmetic. You tear that away, it's not, it's not going to affect the structure of the building at all. So
That would be good if something can move forward with that.
I hope so. So the individual I've been talking to has a potential sizable payday coming up, and it's where, when he started his company, it's where they held their first ever company dinner. Has sentimental value as well. So, and he's in the construction industry. So again, he has the expertise. The idea would be to fix it up and then find, now I have found a couple people who would potentially be willing to operate a restaurant there. They don't want to own it. They're people who, there's two different individuals who've both owned restaurants for a long time. And they basically made it clear they don't want to own a restaurant again, but they would be happy to manage one on someone else's dime. They just, the stress of ownership was way too much for them. So
Would the restaurant part be grandfathered in? Because some of the new rulings with the church, the two churches right across the road, they can't be within a certain distance of a liquor establishment.
yes, well, we'll have to, I would certainly fight that it would be grandfathered in.
Okay. I was liking the
There
idea
has
of a
not-
microbrewery we talked about how long ago?
Yeah,
years
so the
ago.
issue with it is, it's never seen another use, but arguably that use hasn't been in place for many, many years.
Many years.
So there may, if someone tries to fight it, we may have a challenge, but if the churches don't fight it, we might be able to get it through. And I don't see why the churches would fight it. But who knows?
With the park across the street, it'd be a great place for a coffee house, bakery and coffee house, sandwich shop.
Yep,
Walk across the street, go to the park.
with a bed and
Have lunch.
breakfast at the apartment next door. But
Well, what this particular buyer would do if he did buy that is he would
Offices.
probably, yeah,
Yeah.
the house would become his offices instead of apartments.
Right.
So,
be awesome if there was a restaurant there, because I know somebody has the recipe.
yeah.
For the clam
whole
chowder.
Clam chowder, yeah.
Yep.
The last time I had a drink in the Cartwright was with Jim Breeze.
Wow. That was a while ago.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, in fact, last time I was there, I had the clam chowder with
Yeah.
my mom was in town.
My-
We
yeah,
were out
my-
for fish fry
me
and clam
too.
chowder.
But yeah, there's a lot of things in there depending on how the person wanted to handle it. You go on eBay and there's Cartwright stuff there, matchbooks and you name it. And all of that is still in that building.
Well, so the first group, their idea, they wanted to do a microbrewery attached to the restaurant. But their idea was that they would keep Cartwrights there smartly because you would get instant coverage, right? The news stations would be talking about it. There's name recognition. You don't, one of the big challenges for a new restaurant is getting it known that it's there. So by making it Cartwrights, even if the menu wasn't exactly the same, it would, that would help them out a whole lot. So this individual doesn't have a desire to run a microbrewery or anything like that. It would probably just be a restaurant. But in the microbrewery might have been a challenge with the laws because again, that wasn't the former use. That would be a new use. So
And the school's just down the road.
the school's just down the road. So, but like I said, a restaurant, I could certainly see, again, making that argument that since it was a restaurant that did have a liquor license, creating that again, could argue would be grandfathered in.
Well, we'll get to that point once somebody decides to buy it, right? Yeah, exactly. Knock on,
I do know that or I shouldn't say no, I've been told by a couple sources that the mother is definitely interested in selling it to somebody who is interested in trying to restore it.
yeah.
There's a lot of sentimental value in the continued existence of a Cartwrights. I don't know if the kids care as much, but I was told the mother does. So hopefully we can get something going soon.
Awesome.
Anything else?
No, thank you for staying on.
Oh, my pleasure. Have a good one.
So if the confessional becomes a bathroom, does that mean all my sins go away?
If the
I
confessional
was saying, if they
becomes a
turn the
bathroom-
confessional into a bathroom, my sins disappeared.
Who
Fresh start.
who invited him?
Just flushed down the drain.
All right,
They
thank you,
moved up a
Steve.
few weeks.
And thank you, Lisa, for your update. Steve talked about Chapman Park, so other than the fact that Joe has volunteered to be part of the ad hoc committee that Steve wants to put together concerning Chapman Park, the present owners are out of town until February 6th. So we're not looking at anything until they get back, so we can create this small committee and sit down and discuss this. So the next thing on the agenda was the election of officers. And Tina, with Michelle not being here tonight, should we table that?
You can, but I would just urge, the members of the committee, somebody please volunteer to be secretary.
Yeah, that was the next thing on my list is we need
Yeah,
here for secretary. Unless somebody has an issue with that, is it all right we table that until the next meeting?
It's-
Okay,
okay,
so I have a consensus.
okay.
Table
I
that.
got it. Yep, thank you.
Yep. So the one thing I will mention, because Dave wasn't here for that part of that, but at our May 19th, 2020 meeting, we changed the bylaws a little bit. And we changed the meeting time from 7 o'clock to 6:30. And we had an addendum that made, when a new chair is voted in, the old chair automatically becomes the vice chair. Do you remember when we did that? I have the copies of when we did that, if somebody wants to see that. And the chair, the vice chair, and the secretary became part of the executive committee. We all voted on that, and like I said, I have it if you guys want to see it. Which is why we won't be voting for a vice chair next meeting when we do vote. So we'll be taking nominations for chair and nominations or volunteers for secretary at our next meeting.
Why not before the next meeting? So we've got a slate already.
Okay, Tina would like to know ahead of time. So if anybody wants to volunteer, you can think about it and then let me know so that we can create a slate for nominations and vote for the next meeting. Any questions? Lisa can't vote, so not looking at her.
I'm just a bystander.
No, you're not. You're an integral part. You're just not allowed to
Well,
vote.
thank you for that.
Okay. That being said, unless somebody else has something with old business, that concludes what I had on the agenda. And if you don't, then we're going to move on to new business. Okay? This didn't end up on the agendas that you guys have. Things happened. But one of the things for new business, as you guys know, let me look at my notes here. Okay, so May is National Historic Preservation Month. Since 1987, the Henrietta Historic Site Committee has recognized property owners who have demonstrated preservation, renovation, and repurposing of historic buildings, helping maintain Henrietta's historic heritage. Okay, we've been doing this for many years. So Tina has asked me today to remind everybody that May's not that far away, and we need some nominations for the potential Heritage Award in May. Okay, so be proactive, take a look around at the different houses when you're driving. If you let me know an address, I can look up on the list of past awards we've handed out. I've got the whole database of that Becky gave me. Thank you very much, Becky. And then we can discuss it so that when we move forward, we'll be a little.
I believe that actually came from our friend Tina. Thanks, Tina.
Okay, thank you, Tina. I'm sorry. Becky sent it to me. Anyway, but that way we could get some input at the next meeting. So it gives us a little bit of time to actually do the research on the ones we think we might want to do. Okay? So remember that we do a Centennial Farm Award. If there's a farm you think has been in operation by the same family or in continued operation, it doesn't have to be the same family. There's two versions of the Centennial Farm Award. For 100 years, that's an award we've handed out. We did in this past year. Or the Architectural Heritage Award is for people who have tried to restore their house back to its original glory. So there's some options. So just keep your eye out and bring me a list, please. Okay? Anybody else have any new business before I move on to the other business part of the meeting?
Gary, is Michael heading?
Michael.
Will his house be ready by any of this?
I would say with the weather and the condition of the painting, he's been working on it, but, and I don't believe, I had contacted him and asked him to ask Virginia Bartos from the state where his house is in the process for becoming nationally registered. I know he'd really like to do that because his property line extends quite far into the proposed project in the West Henrietta. If he becomes nationally registered, and that was one of the questions I was asking Steve earlier, would that mean that they would have to go through that next step with the federal program? I was looking at that today, and there's a bunch of other things they have to do if their property line connects with a nationally registered house. So I have not heard back from him yet. So, and I think, hasn't Michael's house got one in the past? Do you remember, Tina?
Oh, I don't remember.
All right, I'll look that up so that we know. So, anything else? Dave, Joe? Okay, that being said, this was a last minute because my email from Tyler, I wasn't sure if he was going to be able to make it here or not. But Becky, you got the PDF that he sent you?
I got it. I'm ready.
Okay, so Tyler, if you'd like to come up and sit at the table here and explain. Tyler wants to do, he's considering historic designation. And with his house and the research we've already done, that would probably be pretty much a slam dunk. As you can see, that was called Sherman's Corners way back when on some of the old maps. But he would like to do some work, and he wanted to know if it would impact the historical designation. Should he do the work before or after, or if he gets the designation, is it going to be a problem? So he came tonight to explain what he'd like to do so that we can have a little bit of input to what he's thinking about. So Tyler.
Thanks,
And-
Jared.
Oh, and Tyler, just let me know when you want me to go to the next picture.
Will do.
So name and address, please.
Thanks, Gary. Tyler Keller with 1063 Gary Station Road, which is the old house on the screen. My wife and I bought the place in the summer of 2018. We, prior to purchasing it, had been living in the Erie Station Village and drove past it every day. And I work for RKW Engineering at 5569 West Henrietta Road, which is another historical building. And my boss and I even at one point had the conversation that if this house ever came up for sale, we'd be fighting over which one of us was going to buy it. So when it came up for sale, I got into it. The original price was a bit high, so we kind of waited and waited. The owner finally came down right into our ballpark, and it was a no-brainer. I refer to it as the smartest, stupid thing I've ever done. Something like this was always intended to be my retirement project, but I am about 30, 40 years away from that. This house probably has added another decade into my working life. All that being said, it is my pride and joy, and I do intend to restore it to its former beauty. It has seen a little bit of neglect before we picked it up, but yeah. Going forward, it is a 200-year-old house, and it is part of farm property that has been subdivided in the past. We currently do not have a paved driveway. The gravel driveway isn't completely on our property line, and we do not have any kind of garage structure whatsoever. So the garage is the one thing we wanted to address first. Becky, if you go to the next. This plan is my proposed concept to do a barn within the property lines. Going right through the middle of the page is our property line. And you can see at the top of the page are two foundations that are remnants of barns that are no longer. During this time of year, when you drive past, you can see a silo in the back of, well, it's not our property, but for lack of a better word, the back of the property. And that is the foundation that is at the top left of the drawing. Because of how little space we have and with how mature the property is, we've got numerous trees, which has made putting something quite difficult, to say the least. Especially if it's a garage that you're going to be going in and out of every day in this time of year. You don't want to have to go all the way across your property to, through the snow. We at one point had considered doing it closer to the middle of the top part of the page, where the sidewalk comes out of the house. But after sitting on our porch for the last 2 summers, there's no way we could think of staring off our porch into the side of a garage. With moving it back to the property, I am thinking of doing this in 2 phases. The first phase would be what is shown here with a pole barn type structure, simply for the sake of getting something up and getting something up quickly. The confliction here, and that's why I bring it to this board, is by pole barn, I would be concerned that that would disqualify the house from any kind of historic recognition. Typically, and I mean, ideally, I would like to do this as economically as possible. It's, especially with these times, and there are ways to do so. It would be perfectly proper structure and up to code. However, with the materials that can be used, I would be concerned as that it would take away too much from the house itself. Another part of the reason why I've moved it back into the property I have is it will be sheltered. It won't be as glaringly obvious from the road as you're driving past for 8 months out of the year. But for during the winter, it will be obvious. If you go to the next page, Becky. So this is what the house looks like as you're driving up Erie Station Road, heading towards the middle, and the driveway going in. And you can see, as said, there's a bunch of vegetation all around that kind of shelters the property. And then Becky, if you go to the next page. This is a bit of a rendering of what my intent would be. And during the during the summer, pretty much looking from that same view, the pole barn would be somewhat hidden behind the brush. But I will admit it is a large structure. It is 24 by 30 feet. It would be seen. One other thing I brought up to Gary in our correspondence is I eventually would like to do a retaining wall across the front of the property. Right now, the entire front lawn is very soft and just it's not someplace you want to be, not someplace you really want to walk across without worrying about tripping. And it doesn't really have all the curb appeal I'm seeking. I would like to do a retaining wall across the front of the property with the sidewalk coming out from the front porch down to the street with steps going through the retaining wall. Right now, as I said, there is no sidewalk. You walk up the front porch and it's into just the grass. This I spoke with Gary about, and he indicates that should not be that much of an issue, as it's a beautification to the landscape rather than anything affecting the structure. I just did want to bring that forward. That is another intent of mine sooner than later. Let's go to the next slide or next.
Yeah, because you had talked about a fieldstone retaining wall.
Correct, yes.
So it would be more period, historically context.
Just
Go
for
ahead.
reference, this is photo from the winter when everything is dead and pretty much where my car is parked, and between those two trees behind it is where the garage structure would go. So I said during the non-foliage time years, it would be pretty obvious that was there.
With the doors facing the drive.
Doors facing Erie Station.
Erie Station, okay.
And then the next slide.
Yes, okay.
This would be my final, trying to use my words here. It's just the second phase and would be the final addition to the house. It doesn't show up as well in here. Becky, can you zoom into the bottom left hand? Perfect. Yep, perfect. So with the main house, obviously centering the page, and then the proposed pole barn at the top left, it would be nice if I could add on an attached garage at some point in the future. If I could do this would be painstakingly matched to the main house. It would be my goal, just with my own personality, for someone who didn't know that wasn't there, they would never know that the garage that's attached to the house was an addition. My concern there is, in order to do this, I would need to pretty much expand that part of the house by 6 feet, and I didn't know if that would be much of an issue. One kind of as a fallback, if the pole barn was an issue for the historical value of the house, we could always just go the route of doing the attached garage right from the start. My only concern with that is it would easily be 3 times as much money and would delay our process and being able to do so for a few years. So this is, my intent with the house, my hopes and dreams. I do want to get the house on the registry. It's something that is important to me, but I just want to make sure that I'm playing by the rules, and I don't want to trap myself into doing or into not being able to do future work. But at the same time, I want to make sure that whatever I do does comply.
And I've explained to, and I'll be sending this out to everybody now that we know he's been here. The email correspondence between the two of us, that any modifications after he becomes historically designated, and I gave him the process, it has to come to us for review, and then we make a recommendation to the town board, and then the town board votes on it. That requires an Article 10 hearing and a public hearing. So he decided he wanted to create this so that we could have an idea of what he was thinking about and pick our brains for some ideas of what we thought. Obviously, they had pole barns back in the era that this house was built. And in the years moving forward, other barns. Unfortunately, the two barns that were on that property are not on his property. They're on the other side of the lot line. How do you deal with the driveway not being all yours?
I have a gentleman's agreement with the neighbor
Yeah,
that I'm allowed to park on it and use it as my own driveway. It's just,
interesting.
actually, if go to the next page. I do intend on acquiring the property to the east and to the west and to the south of us. But in speaking with the current property owner, he's not looking to give it away. So this isn't something that I'm necessarily looking to do.
That's
Until I
down the road.
Yeah, until I've got that kind of money floating around.
Right.
This being kept in mind, if this was a possibility, or in a perfect world where money wasn't an issue, I wouldn't even be considering doing the pole barn because I don't want to take away from the green space in my property. If I was able to pick this up and reuse either of those two existing foundations, that would be the best case scenario. We've half-heartedly been talking with my in-laws about the possibility of them picking up this property, and I would be rebuilding the barn that was closest to Erie Station as an in-laws property or as a rental property, essentially.
You'll pay for that in more than one way, my friend.
I know. Let's talk about snowboards.
How much acreage do you have with what you have right now?
0.43. And then the area in blue is 1.01 acres. So it pulls up to nearly an acre and a half. The partners that own the farmland own all three sides of ours. That sliver, Becky, if you can go to page 2. So Middle Road doesn't show up on this drawing, but that sliver between Middle Road and where the property line is currently is not ours. As one of those things that everyone just assumes that our property goes up to Middle Road, but that is not the case.
Right, Middle Road would be running along the bottom where the icons are, the computer icons
So
out.
you don't go, it doesn't go out down the middle road at all?
Not at
No,
all.
it doesn't.
Yeah, he has all three sides of me that are not Middle Road, or sorry, Erie Station Road
How
itself.
wide is that? 20 feet, maybe?
I don't
About
know. I
40.
looked at the parcel viewer trying to get an idea of that, and it just gave me the whole surround. It didn't give me that piece.
And the current owner is not interested in selling that at any point. I have
The
mentioned,
20 feet.
yeah, that
And not even that sliver.
Wonder if they were thinking of signage or something future.
they do have intent to develop the 88 acres at some point. Not anytime soon is what I've been told, but that is an intent. They don't want to be speaking for someone else right now, but that's just
Right.
So that being said, that's another reason why I definitely want to get the house registered historic, just to have a little more say of what's going on around it.
Little more buffer?
Yeah.
A little bit more.
Yep.
Perfect sense.
I do appreciate everything that Steve has done, and knowing that minimum lot size for anything developed in this parcel would be 5 acre. That's good to know, but nonetheless. And yeah, if it comes down to the point that I find out that the owner is looking to sell, that it's gonna be more motivation to go after the surrounding property. I would like to acquire that just simply because my wife and I have the retirement project hobby of doing a small vineyard back there. So
Oh, wow.
for that reason, I would like to pick up as much as I could. But as I said, that's like item number 84, and I'm on number 3.
So Dave would be our barn person. He can probably, not necessarily tonight, but give you some ideas moving forward about period type.
Yeah, but I'm assuming since you want to be cost effective with that, you're looking at a metal pole barn.
Yeah.
So, pretty limited on the metal.
Yeah,
I mean, it's well off the road too, so I'm not.
right. Well, as you know, because I've sent you the code before, it's visual impact from the road.
Right.
And, you know, you might have to plant another tree to block it. It's pretty well blocked now. I drove by, and you're right, it's pretty open at the moment, but because it's winter, but any comments on the front of the house with the sidewalks and the fieldstone retaining wall and the steps down to the road that anybody thought would have an issue if he was to? Thank you, Becky. Get this designated before he started working?
I would like to point out that I apologize. I had planned on doing a much better rendering, but time has been.
Better than I can do, so.
Yep. Well, he sent me this thing quick on Wednesday. I fired it back and he told me he was going to be out of town. So we weren't even sure if he was going to make it tonight, which is why that's why I held off.
So it'll be a retaining wall with a like a stone veneer.
Yeah.
You getting drift off that or something? Is it drifting towards the road or?
Not necessarily. It's honestly aesthetics. That I kind of want to widen the base of the driveway. Anyone that will drive by will see the number of times my wife and I have backed up part of that hill, not on purpose. So yeah, it'll be a little bit of practicality for the base of the driveway, but then also just aesthetics that right now the property just kind of, drifts off down to the road. And front lawn, I would like to get leveled out just from my own analness.
Now, in your email, you spoke about privacy fencing.
Correct.
Was
That
that-
would be further down the road and with probably more of the phase 2. If we were to do the attached garage.
Okay.
But
You wrote here it's going to be on the south side, or the south half of the property, sorry, on the east lot line. So that would be on the lot line with that narrow piece that
up against
you
the
don't
middle,
own.
Down the perpendicular with middle?
correct.
Or parallel, I should say, or perpendicular of?
Parallel to the middle road. Because again, during the summer, it's not much of an issue, but right now, if you wanted to drive up middle road at night, you can look right into our kitchen. So,
Right, because you don't have as many trees along that edge.
and we would like to have the backyard be outdoor living space.
Does the historical site committee require all seasons for it not to be visual?
No, I don't think it's that specific.
No, it just said the roadscape from the road. So, And you'd like a privacy fence, so that wouldn't necessarily be historically context, but I don't know.
That one's not that big of an issue. Instead, we've been living with it.
Right. And then this rendering doesn't really show the down the road attached garage, which would be off the end of the house.
It does not, no.
Okay.
That's the part that I would like to have gotten.
Ran out of time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was working on until 6:04.
Right.
and Hit send.
Right. Anybody have any comments on this? Obviously, if he was to become designated, we couldn't make any official comments until we had the actual plans, but he's just trying to get an idea of. I don't really know if they make any metal that looks like it would be.
I think as far as the retaining wall and the sidewalk is concerned, that's really protecting the house and the property. And, you know, he and his wife need to live there, and it needs to be a livable space for them, and it needs to be a safe space for them. I can't see that that would be an issue if it was a designated property.
Which was
You know, he's not going to put up a retaining wall that looks, that's, you know,
concrete block.
concrete block. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
No, and that's with me being me and my profession and a whole lot of other things. Anything I would do on this house is going to be,
Sure.
I'm not,
Right.
Right.
just for the sake of doing so.
And then I think even a metal pole barn, as long as it's white like the house, and I think it's got a red roof.
Yeah.
You match it's a metal roof, so I mean.
Yeah.
And with that coming up earlier with church, I
Yeah.
kind of want to ask that, like, could I do a metal roof on the pole barn,
Yeah.
even though we have a
Well, that makes sense.
tile roof on
You know.
the house?
Basically, my response to him was, I'll read you what I wrote, but if you keep the proposed projects that would be viewed from the street, and that would be what we'd have to take a good look at, walls, fences, and steps within a historic context of the property, approval of the project shouldn't be a problem. So, you know, we'd really like you to move forward with becoming designated sooner rather than later, especially with what's happening in the West Hamlet, excuse me. But that being said, you know, that's kind of our thoughts. Dave helped with the barns at Tinker a lot, so he's used to playing with the old barns. And that's why I thought he'd be good for you for that. Anybody else have comments along that line?
These photos that are up now are historical aerial photos. I don't recall what year this one's from, but the previous two, I believe, are 61 and 73. This being 73 and 61. This shows the two other barns that are no longer. And you can see how this was at one point just one solid parcel. Working with Gary, trying to figure out a little bit more information on the parcel itself. When we bought the house, we did get a deed roll going all the way back to 1840.
Mm-hmm.
The house has conflicting information depending on where you look. It was either said to be built in 1820 or 1831. I'm also trying to nail down that to get an actual build date. And again, where this interest has come from and working with this committee is to get there. And yeah, I do definitely want to get it on the registry, local, state, and national. I'm interested in it all. And I feel kind of conflicted coming here tonight saying, or, you know, asking this. I'm not, you know, not per se saying if you say no, well, then I'm not going on the registry. I'm also coming here tonight asking, saying, hey, I want to do this. What's the best way to do so? I know that comments can't be formally given on projects that aren't registered and they're not they're only a concept and are only,
Right.
you know, not, that there are no building permits being pulled on, but
Well, we've done that in the past. People have come, this is my idea, this is what I'm thinking, and then we tell them, okay, if you want to be historical, you need to do this, this, and this, and, you know, they either listen or they don't. So, but,
Can I ask Tyler, would you consider like a green privacy fence, certain kinds of trees instead of a regular wooden fence?
absolutely. We kind of have that now during the summer. So yeah, I would be open to doing evergreens or shrubs. Or,
Sure, okay.
Absolutely be open to that. My only concern there would be our property line is pretty much right within, it's only a few feet off of the house.
Mhm.
So it goes back to not owning.
oh, right,
Right, okay,
So insane.
Yeah,
it is.
right. So, but your privacy fence is down the road. And so maybe by then you'll have found a way to own a little bit more land.
correct. Well, except for where I want to put the fence.
Okay,
No, that's a really good idea. Actually, I didn't think about that. Yeah,
Yep.
I would definitely consider that.
Yeah, because people have done that before and put the hedge high enough that they can actually put a fence on the other side that you can't see from the road.
I want to do that. Why spend that money?
Well, why do people do anything?
That's true.
But, you know, so my other question to the committee is if hopefully Tyler fills out his application, which he has, and sends us the information where he'd like to be designated. Anybody have a problem with that? I mean, I can forward you the research I've done, which I've sent to Tyler, and he's been doing more. And Tina knows also, I mean, this house is on the maps going way back
right.
to the 1850s, which is the earliest map we have.
And likewise, I can pass along the deed roll I have.
Yes,
too.
or at least copies thereof.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
I have it on my computer. I'll do that tonight.
Right. But questions, comments, thoughts? Joe?
No, I don't have any problems with it.
Well, if you get your application in, we can get the process going, which I've already done a bit of work on it from I can't remember, almost a year ago, you sent me that original, you sent it to Tina and she forwarded it to me when you were asking for information about the house, and I did a bunch of research.
Oh, wow. That's probably right after we bought the house.
Yeah,
That would have been 18, early 19.
yeah. So already have a bunch of the information compiled, especially with, you can take a picture of the deed roll. We know the people who have lived there and they're early settlers of Henrietta. So, you know, my vote would be yes. Ray, any comments here?
I have no issues with it. I believe, as it was stated, we don't know exactly if it was 1820s or 1830s as far as when this was built.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
Is it a federal style farmhouse?
I would say
Yeah.
it's the kind of mutt of Greek revival. And
Yeah, I think it's more Greek revival. I actually brought the book with me tonight. But because of the entryway and the style of the windows.
Yeah, I
But-
mean, everything up here is transitional between federal and
Right.
revival because we're out here in the
Yep.
States during that time.
Exactly. And depending on when it was actually built, they might have seen this Greek revival and then, or this federal, and then they looked at this Greek revival and said, oh, let's just do this to the front.
I feel that's what they did.
Yeah, probably. But, okay, does anybody else have anything for Tyler? Other than thank you for coming forward?
But thank you for your time.
And we want to see it when it's all done.
Pardon?
We want to see it when he's all done putting everything together.
Well, yeah, yeah.
What we got for you.
I always like,
Cocktail hour?
you know, when,
We can never do that.
when you get your application in, well, actually, we have to come out to the property, a couple of us, just to look around. But maybe we can talk him into showing us around a little.
Absolutely.
Would love that. I've always admired that house.
Thank you.
But we wish you the best with that.
Thank you.
Okay, that being said, the only other thing that I'm going to bring up before I ask for a motion to adjourn is, I know I've showed you guys this in the past, the book we've been trying to use. This got brought up at the conference we were at, actually. And then this is a new one that I've been studying, which I'm going to actually be sending you guys a flow chart that comes from here about some of the things and how you do an evaluation. It's a step-by-step. But it's the Historic Preservation by Norman Tyler. An introduction to its history, principles, and practices. And the reason I picked this one up is because it has whole sections on creating historic districts, which I'm going through, and I'll be sending stuff out to people. The other thing I will do, because I have a PDF copy, and I'm not sure at the moment, did anybody else get the resolution for Good Shepherd Church as a PDF? I know Michelle and I did.
Yeah.
I've got a
Did
copy.
you all get it? Okay,
yeah.
good. Then I don't have to forward this one out.
And I was gonna, Tina, I was gonna forward you a copy of the distribution center remarks that I had, as well as a copy of this resolution. Do you want that for the minutes?
I've got, actually, I could hear you much better this time, so I think I've got what you said, and I do have a copy of the town board resolution, so I don't need it.
The other thing that I'm going to copy out to everybody that I'll scan this is what Anita brought us back from the Ontario Historical Society, the writing report on home histories. So you can all see what she brought back. So in some places, the booklet, somebody ended up with it.
Yeah, it's right here.
Okay. So that being said, that's all I had. Did anybody else have any other business? Ray?
No.
Okay. Tina?
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
I was all set? Okay, that being said, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So motioned.
Second,
I second.
okay. We have a consensus. I can see it on your faces. So, and Ray, I can see him. So we have a consensus. So the meeting is adjourned at 8:26. Thank you very much. The next meeting is scheduled for
March 1st.
March 1st, 6:30 here.